In this video, we'll show you how to assemble the full Balanduino kit and get it up and running. To get started, you'll need a couple of tools. First off, you'll need a PH2 screwdriver. You will also need a small Phillips screwdriver for the screw terminals. And you'll need some pliers or a wrench. Or best would be to use both. The first thing we want to put together is the actual structure of the Balanduino. So for this, we'll need the 3 wooden plates, where we have the top layer, the middle layer, and the bottom layer. The first thing we're going to put together is the bottom layer, as we would need to put the motor brackets onto the bottom layer. So take out the motor brackets together with the small back of screws. In this back we would need the wood screws, which is known as the screws with the grinding edges. When you have found all the 8 screws with the grinding edges, we would have to start putting this together. The idea of the bottom layer is to place the brackets into these pre-drilled holes by using the wooden screws. So this is the case where you would need your screwdriver. To get the screw into the hole, you would have to press quite firmly and keep pressing down while screwing. This is very important to make sure that the screw keeps going and drilling through the wood. When the wooden screw is all the way through, tighten it up a bit, but not too much, so we can still move the actual bracket around for later adjustments. Continue by doing so with all 4 screws for both brackets in each side. When all the brackets has been put into place, it is time to tighten up them, to center them as best as possible. Now this one is tightened, and now for this one, center it up and tighten. Alright, so now we got a tight bottom plate ready for the motors and also ready for the main board. But we will get back to the main board, because now the next step is to put together the rest of the frame with the 2 other layers. So for this we will need the 4 steel rods, and we will need the other bag of screws, which includes the washers, nuts, which will be used to put together the complete frame. So take out the washers, take out the middle nuts, and also take out the top and bottom nuts. there'll be a total of 8 top and bottom nuts, 16 middle nuts, and 24 washers or spacers. So now let's start by assembling the bottom layer with the rods, screwing them together. Start off by taking a single rod and put it through one of the corners in the bottom layer. Now you'll need a washer and one of the top bottom nuts. Screw the top bottom nut onto the rod. And now for the other side, you'll need another washer and a middle nut. So screw the middle nut all the way down the rod. And this don't have to be tight, just tight enough to hold the rod in place. So you can use your fingers to tighten up. We'll use the wrench or the pliers later on. Repeat this process with the 3 other corners and make sure that the rod is pointing upwards and the motor bracket is pointing downwards. Now, as we have finished the bottom layer, all the rods are in place with the top and bottom nuts and the middle nuts and the washers. It is time for the middle layer to be put into place. But before we can do that, we need to place 4 middle nuts about in the middle on the rod for the middle layer to rest on. So go ahead and take some middle nuts and start screwing them into place just around the middle of the rod. We would need to adjust this to fit the layer and adjust all of these to be the exact height. So around midway, and when you have the knot in place, remember to place a washer on top. Repeat this process for all 4 rods before we continue and put on the middle layer. When your middle plate is level, the next step is to take 4 washers and put them on the top to prepare the another 4 middle nuts to hold the middle layer in place. So screw these middle nuts down to hold the middle layer tight. The next step is to get the top and last layer into place. This will be done by placing another 4 middle nuts to hold the top layer in place. So place these a bit down. and place a washer on each as well. Now you simply have to repeat the process by taking your top layer and aligning it and the holes with the rods. And when that is in place, you will notice that our middle layer is not all the way in the middle, but for this case it won't really matter and can always be adjusted later on. But for now, we'll put the top plate into place by putting another 4 washers on the rods, the last 4 of them, and then we'll take the last top and bottom nuts and screw onto all of the 4 ends of the rods. This will conclude the rod assembly, almost. Because now we'll get to a bit easier adjusting part, where in this case, now when we have our top and bottom nuts in place, you'll simply pull down on the plate to make it level, and then adjust the middle nuts to tighten up. And there you go. You have your Balanduino platform. The next step is to sort the screws in the small back in 3 different piles, depending on the length. The small back, now as you've used the wooden screws, contains 3 different lengths. We have the long ones, and we have the middle ones, and we have the small ones. So as you'll notice, there will be 4 small ones, 8 middle ones, and 4 long ones. The 4 long ones and the 4 small ones will be used to assemble the mainboard, to put and hold the mainboard in place on the bottom layer, while we'll be using the 8 middle ones right now to put the motors into place. So next step will be to put the motors in place. So take the 2 motors from the Balanduino kit, and take your assemble frame from before. We'll start off with the first motor. The motor brackets contain 4 holes and the motor contains 6, but when you put the motor in with the shaft towards the bottom plate, you'll notice that only 4 of the holes in the motor can be used. So in this case, go ahead and align the 4 holes in the motor with the bracket, and go and get your screwdriver and take one of the screws, the middle sized ones, and screw in the motor. Repeat this process with all 4 screws. Make sure that the screws are tight, but avoid over tightening them, as it might end up damaging the screw head. So that was one motor. Flip the frame around and repeat the whole process with the other motor. Alright, so now we have the two motors in place. The next step will be to prepare the mainboard for the bottom layer. To prepare the mainboard for assembly, go ahead and get the mainboard from the Balanduino kit and get the 4 spaces, the golden spaces, from the big bag. Furthermore, we will need the rest of the screws from the small bag, where we have the long and the small ones. So for now, we'll start off by putting all the spaces on the bottom side of the mainboard by using the small screws, the short screws. So go ahead and take a screw, put it into one of the holes of the mainboard, hold it into place and flip it around. Take one of the spaces and screw it on top. Repeat this process. Yet again, remember to use the short screws for all of the 4 holes in the Balanduino mainboard. Now we are ready to place the mainboard onto the frame. But before doing so, we will have to screw in the battery cable into the battery connector here on the mainboard. So go ahead and get the battery cable from the Balanduino kit. And this is a strip cable to make it easy for you. So these ends will just have to be pulled off like that. And then twist these around a slightly bit to prepare them for the Molex connector. Alright, go ahead and get your small Phillips screwdriver and prepare the mainboard by unscrewing and untightening the screw terminal. Now for the battery cable, look on the bottom where it says plus and minus. So plus at the right side and minus at the left side. Turning it around makes it plus towards the edge, which is the red cable. Put it in, hold it in place and take your Phillips screwdriver and tighten up. Do the same thing with the black cable. Make sure any untwisted pairs are kept twisted and tighten up. Before continuing, make sure that the cable polarity is right by turning around and confirming that red wire is going into plus and black wire is going into minus. Now we are ready to put the mainboard onto the bottom layer of our Balanduino frame. So go ahead and get your frame from before and take the mainboard and hold it into place. As you'll see, the bottom layer has 4 holes matching up the size of the main board. By turning it around, you'll be able to put the main board in place. So take one of the long screws, the screws that we have left, and try to align by looking through the holes. Try to align the board so you can see the spacer and put through the screw, and try and see if you can manage to screw it into place. This task can be difficult though, so it might be easier to turn it around, pull the screw up and place the spacer on top while screwing. There you go. Repeat this process with all 4 screws. When all 4 screws are slightly tightened, go ahead and pick your PH2 screwdriver and tighten up everything. But yet again, avoid over tightening it, as this may damage the screw heads. Perfect. So now we have both the main board and motors assembled to the frame, which means that we can now connect the motors to the main board by removing the wrap around the wires. And then by looping through the wire here a single time to twist it and hold it into place. And then put it into the connector as displayed here. There's only one right way of this connector that it can go, which is with the tap pointing outwards. And the same thing with the other one. Twist it around. And put it into place. All right. So that's about it for getting the frame prepared. Now we will continue and put the wheels and the hubs onto the motors. Before putting the wheels onto the frame to the motors, we would like to tighten up all the bolts to make sure that the frame is rigid. So go ahead and get a pair of pliers or also a wrench to hold everything in place. And just start by tightening up. Alright, now the frame is stable and rigid. So we are ready to go on and put the motors together with the wheels. For this step, mounting the wheels to the motors, we will be using the so-called hops. These hops will go onto the motor shaft and into the wheel like that. This will make it easy to disassemble the Balanduino and pull the wheels apart without having to disassemble and unscrew the hop from the motor itself. So for this we would need the 2 hops, the 4 fennel screws. These are the tiny ones. And the 2 lock rings together with this wrench, the small wrench that came in the big bag, which fits into these small screws. So for now, place one of the screws on the wrench and take one of the hops, and now we are about to place this hop on one of the motor shafts. And here it's very important to notice that this motor shaft is a D shaft, which means that it has a grinded edge, an edge that is flat, which is the edge I have right there. So with this edge pointing out towards us, you would have to make the edge with the 2 holes in the hop point the same direction. Now pop the hop all the way to the end of the motor and go ahead and get your wrench with one of the screws and put it into the outer hole. You can also feel it now. I can still move this a bit, but that is due to it being at the D-shaped edge. So I'm in the correct place, so tighten it up a bit. But not too much still, so it can move freely. For the next screw, the inner screw, to hold everything in place. Tighten up the inner screw and the outer screw, maybe by doing so by twisting the wrench. Make sure that they are firmly and properly tightened, as these will hold your wheels onto the motor shaft. Alright, that's it. You mounted your hop to the motor. And we will have to repeat the same procedure with the other motor in the other side. Alright, so that was the hops, both of them, now mounted to the motors. And the final step will actually just be to take the 2 wheels and put them onto the hops. But in this matter, they have a special orientation, so this will be a matter of trial and error. So don't worry if you can't get it on, like now. I can't get this one to fit, but that is simply due to the wheel being in the wrong orientation. So turn it around and put it on. So now when you have it here, the next step is to use the locking ring to hold it in place. For this purpose, a special tool has been made. But if you don't have a tool like this for these locking rings, you can see, kind of hold it out. You can also use a normal pair of pointy pliers. But in this case, for the demonstration purpose, I'll use this special locking tool and put it outside. Like that, to hold it in place. And now the wheel will go nowhere. Repeat the procedure with the other side. And you're ready to go. Alright, so we are almost done. We just need a couple of final steps before you will be able to see your own Balanduino balancing. The steps that we are missing is to put and hold the battery in place, and if you like, do a firmware upgrade of the mainboard to the latest revision found on our GitHub or website. But for now, we'll put the battery in place. So take the two straps that came with the Balanduino kit, these Velcro straps, and of course get the battery itself as well. So for now, we'll take one of the straps and loop through so we have the plastic buckle below, but looping through with the Velcro pointing upwards. So here we have the buckle where we can put it in and tighten up. But wait with the whole tightening, as you will have to repeat the process with the other side and then put the battery in place. Alright, so now go ahead and get the cord that you put into place before. And remember that this is on the right side, so when you get your battery, you should have the connector on the right side as well. Like this. So now we are actually just ready to tighten it up. And we are ready to go. You're probably excited to get your Balanduino up and running by now. And that's great because there's only 2 single steps left before you have a working balancing robot. And that is to connect the 2 power cords and insert the Bluetooth dongle that came with the kit. But before connecting the 2 power cords, make sure that the Balanduino on and off switch is set to the off position. The switch is set to the off position when it is towards the edge, while you turn on the balancing robot by switching the switch towards the center. But for now, set it to the off position And now we should be able to connect the power cords. The easiest way to connect the power cords is to take the cord from the battery, twist it around down here, and then take the cord from the main board and connect them together. Now they are connected, we should remember to insert the Bluetooth dongle, as mentioned, which should be inserted into the USB host port located on the left side of the main board. Alright, the Balanduino is now ready for action. So lay it down and move the switch to the on position, and you should hear a beep, which indicates that the balancing robot is ready for action.